Hello and welcome to the first episode and video on this channel, DSLR Video Guide. This is a channel where I'm going to be covering everything from filmography to preparing for a film shoot, doing a film shoot, editing, sound mixing, script writing, pre-production, everywhere in between, and I'm going to be covering gear, new stuff, and anything that falls in between the spectrum of filmmaking. You may ask, how am I qualified? Well, I am a filmmaker myself, and I've worked on over 10 short films. I haven't directed all of them, but I've gained very valuable experience from working on those sets, acting, directing, producing, working with the camera, working with other actors, working with the director. It's very helpful to have that experience to know exactly what I'm going into. So, my first video today is going to be a review on this lens, the Canon EF-S 24mm f2.8 Pancake. Now, this lens is quite something because not only is it cheap, but it's tiny. And you can see I have the lens backing on it, but if you take it off, you can really see this thing is tiny. I mean, look at how it's about an inch, and no more than an inch. It is an STM lens, so you're going to have that autofocusing for video that is completely silent. So if you're shooting on a body like a 70D, the newer body, so a 70D, a T5i, I know that those have phase and contrast detection autofocus. And this lens is really small, as you can see. And I have it off right now, but I'll put it on for effect of the video. This is a UV filter. It is a 52mm diameter lens, if anyone's interested in buying a hood or I don't know if they make hoods, but a filter. As you can see, the filter's on, but even that increases the width significantly, and by the time you put the lens cap on, I mean, that's another half. I mean, it's a pretty bulky, actually, by the time you get to it. But this lens is great because it has this focus ring, which is really easy to move, very easy on the fingers, and especially very easy when it's on a camera body. It has autofocus and manual focus, obviously, as any Canon lens will, but it has no image stabilization. So if you're shooting video on this, you will want to either put it on a tripod or put it on a handheld rig. This lens actually shoots very good images and video. If you can see here that there's no, these pictures were shot at 1/8,000th of a second, by the way, so there is some vignetting around the edges, but at 2.8. So these are all at 2.8 1/8,000th of a second, and there is some vignetting because of that 1/8,000th, but you can see that this lens really captures everything. It gets every pixel. It really picks up the depth of field on a crop sensor is about 38.4, I believe, once it's got that crop factor into it with a 1.6 times crop sensor. So it ends up being a really, really nice mid-range focal length lens. You can shoot really anything with this. I mean, this is, people say if you're going anywhere on travel, you should either take a 24 or a 35mm. And I have to agree, because this lens is fantastic. You can't put it on a full frame, obviously, but for a crop sensor lens, for a crop sensor camera, this may be my favorite prime lens, because the Nifty 50 or the Fantastic Plastic, if you put it on a crop sensor body, it's going to end up looking, the field of view is going to end up looking like an 85. So you're really only going to want to use that in a controlled setting. And then there's the 40mm Pancake, but that is also a little bit cramped because that's going to end up looking like 65 or 70, which is still pretty tight of a field of view. So, but this ends up looking fantastic from, it's more or less a little bit wider than what your eye sees. So if you're going street photography, if you're traveling, this is a fantastic lens to bring along because it can really capture the moment, especially with that f2.8. Because if you're shooting outdoors for sports photography, and if you have a body like the 60D like I do, if you throw it up to 1/8,000th of a second and shoot wide open, if you have the light, you can get some beautiful sports and action photography. The video on this lens actually isn't bad either. You can see here I went up around my house and took some basic tests around the neighborhood, and you can see it holds up quite nicely. And this is shooting at 1/50th of a second shutter speed. I think I was shooting wide open with this video, and then f2.8, and then the ISO was probably at 100 or 320. So you can see, because I was shooting completely handheld just with my 60D and this lens, there is some shake. But what you can do is you can actually throw on a stabilizer, like warp stabilizer in Premiere, for example, and just with that you can see it actually rounds out the edges very nicely. And I would say only use that effect for establishing shots like that where you want it to look like you're locked down. I would not recommend using this lens and that effect for a combo of dynamic movement of an actor or camera movement maybe, but really I would only use it for establishing shots and simple shots where you really need it to be just look like it's locked down, because otherwise if you use it with actors it's going to overcompensate for their movement. But that's just a side note on warp stabilizer. But all in all, this lens is fantastic, and it's a whopping $115 on B&H right now. I picked up this lens about a week ago, and I've been playing around with it, and I have to say I love it. I do have my 18 through 55 that I have from an older body, and I have a 55 through 250 that I still use, but this perfectly replaces my 18 through 55, because if I really wanted to have that 50 millimeter, I could put on my 50. But this perfectly is that mid-range. When I, half the time when I'm using my 18 to 55, I find myself just kind of putting it right between 24 and 35, because that's the sweet spot for a field of view that's not too tight and not too wide. And so this is the perfect spot if you're just going to be walking around or taking pictures that you want to be not too close up and not too wide. This is going to be your perfect prime. And honestly, I think if you're starting with the new DSLR or something similar, I think this is your best bet for your first prime, because it's cheap, it's effective, and it's a fantastic field of view for your mid-range focal length. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be back with more reviews and tips and tricks on DSLR filmmaking and products. This is DSLR Video Guide saying farewell. Thank you for watching.